Hi, welcome to My Comic Crush. I'm Vicky Sebring, and I love comics. So let's dive into a long box and see what we find. Welcome back, true believers. I'm Vicky Sebring, and joining me today is my co-host, Scott Sebring.
Hello there.
And as you may have guessed from the opening, we're going way back today. And I mean way back.
How far back, true believers?
All the way back to starting with Fantastic Four, Volume 1, number 44.
We're getting into some classics.
We are going to discuss a chunk of some of the foundational stories that the Marvel Universe is based on. We're going to talk about the Inhumans. We're going to talk about Galactus and the Galactus and Silver Surfer saga, which is like Marvel Universe 101. I mean, really. Now, just a disclaimer here. You know, this is all about My Comic Crush, and I do not have actual hard copy issues, original issues of these storylines. Unfortunately, you want to send me some? I'm more than happy to take them. I have digital issues. We have collective issues.
We've got the huge, wonderful omnibus.
Yes,
that came out quite a few years ago. God, I love that omnibus.
You know, but my pockets do not extend to the first appearance of the Silver Surfer in Galactus. Sad to say. Anybody want to change that? You're welcome to. Drop me a line. I'll send you my PayPal information. Go for it. Make me happy. But otherwise, we are going to talk about the foundational stuff that, I mean, this is...
Much of this has been told and retold and told again.
So many times. My first exposure to the Galactus storyline was in the cartoon, the Fantastic Four cartoons from way back in the day.
Are we talking about the Hanna-Barbera period?
We were talking about the good one without you-know-who.
We don't say the H word here.
We don't say the H word here. Don't make me rant about the H word.
And we don't mean Human Torch.
No, Human Torch is the good H word. We're talking about the bad H word. Yeah, this is that was my first exposure, was in the cartoons, and there are some significant differences to the storyline as it was told in the cartoon when I first saw it, as to the storyline as it appeared and was originally written in the comics.
Well, for me, even as a kid, my very first exposure to the Galactus and the Silver Surfer saga, as it were, was in that original 1967 Fantastic Four cartoon. That's when I was first exposed to any of that stuff. Which was nice about the 60s cartoon, actually, was that most of those episodes were based upon actual issues, actual
yes.
comic book issues. And they did try to, format them to where they would fit into that nice little half-hour Saturday morning thing. But the fact that they were actually going right off of original stories and holding, 75%.
Well, yeah, most of the differences are minor things, replacing certain characters with, they're more compacting.
For example, you wouldn't have Alicia in the 60s cartoon.
Anything that would have been Alicia-oriented sort of fell on Sue. And these are understandable things. When you're translating from one medium to another, something's got to give. By and large, they did a really good job with it. I certainly enjoyed it as a cartoon as a kid, and I enjoyed it reading the original storyline once I got older. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves here. We're not quite to Galactus. Because we're starting back on 44, which is a little bit of pre-Galactus workup, but is also very significant because this is the storyline that first introduces the Marvel Universe to the Inhumans.
Right. It's not the first appearance of an Inhuman, but the actual the terminology actually being brought to the fore. I mean, Medusa had already been appearing in the Fantastic Four as with a group of villains.
Yes.
But this is when Gorgon.
This is the first appearance of Gorgon. And this is when this storyline is when you first realize that she's just not some one-off superpowered person who was bit by a radioactive something or exposed...
A radioactive wig?
Or exposed to a cosmic whatever or a naturally occurrent mutant, that she's actually part of a whole other race of Inhumans who all have individual different powers and things. Which is, also, once again, it's kind of like Marvel Universe 101.
This podcast is mainly your journey, the comic books that you read as a kid and in your teens and so forth. I had actually suggested this to her a couple weeks ago of like, you know what? I would really love to go into a certain series of comics that I absolutely love. This particular run of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby is by far probably one of my all-time favorite moments of any comic history. And when you look at the things that are introduced here during this particular period, even within a year, that we're not going to cover the entire year, but even starting from this particular point at 44, you get introduced to Inhumans. You get introduced to the Silver Surfer. You get introduced to Galactus. You get introduced eventually to the Black Panther and Wakanda and Vibranium. I mean, most of what we're talking about in like Marvel movies these days still comes from
this time period.
Just this year. I mean, Stan and Jack were firing on all cylinders. And another personal favorite of mine is this is when the inker Joe Sinnott really comes into working almost exclusively, on the Jack Kirby stuff and just brings that Jack Kirby art to another level. Jack is brilliant, but Jack has had people who've not inked him well and people who like to take him to that other place. And Joe Sinnott is absolutely my favorite inker on Jack Kirby's stuff. And these comics at this time just explode. This is what I call the Marvel masterworks right here.
This is some pretty good stuff. It's and also I'd like to point out, okay, yes, you get your Inhumans here, but you also get a character of mine that I really have always had a soft spot for, Dragon Man. I love Dragon Man. Dragon Man's great. He doesn't get enough love. He really doesn't. He's just a big baby dragon. He's just so cute.
I never, ever thought of Dragon Man as cute.
He's adorable. He's so sweet. The only problem is people, he's big, so people get scared, and he's just a big baby. He's like a gigantic dragony kitten. He's adorable. I got some Dragon Man love in me, so I admit it. I like to see Dragon Man in a storyline. I could forgive a lot if you throw Dragon Man in there. Just saying, he doesn't get enough love. But before we go on, I want to just round this out because you've already mentioned the big three here. You've mentioned Stan Lee, you've got Jack Kirby, you've got Joe Sinnott. And for issues 44 through 48, which is mainly what's covering the Inhuman saga, the letters were done by Artie Simic. Later on, when you get into the Galactus Silver Surfer storyline, the letterer changes, and it's done by S. Rosen for issues number 49-50. Just to make sure we get all our credits in where credit is due. Okay, now I'm gonna say it. This is some classic stuff, and it's some good stuff. But I'll be the first to admit it. I am not really a big Inhuman fan. And it's especially in the writing in this period where okay, your female depictions are not exactly where I would prefer them to be. You've got Sue in the middle of a crisis changing her hair and turning invisible to be noticed, and but you've also got Johnny at his most immature. Now, these are all the characters are totally true to themselves at the point in time, but having come into them and been exposed to them originally much later in their development, I missed the personal growth that they later achieved. I'm just saying, it's still a good story.
Well, yeah, and at the same time, I mean, we've had, over 50 years of Fantastic Four. When you were really introduced to them, it was practically 20 years into their history.
Yes.
These books, at this stage, in this timeline...
They're not even 4 years old.
They're not even 4 years old yet.
I understand this.
They haven't hit their character puberty yet.
I understand this, but just for anybody who's going back to reread this stuff, and I'm still saying, go back and reread it. But you just got to understand that the Sue Storm you encounter here is maybe not the Sue Storm you're used to seeing. It may be a bit of a mental whiplash if all you've known is the more modern version of Sue. You may need to just, accept it for a product of what it was, and the fact that the characters have not had all the 50 years of personal growth that they eventually do get in development. So you sort of gotta take that on board with you when you're reading, but it's still good reading. That said, I don't know that 50 years of personal development helped Crystal much.
You're still never going to forgive her for marrying Quicksilver.
I've never understood the point of Crystal. She's I don't know. She's Lockjaw's teddy bear, which I'm fine with, I guess. I love Lockjaw. Lockjaw's awesome. Lockjaw is cool. Lockjaw, you know what I want? I want to see the adventures of Dragon Man and Lockjaw. That's what I want to see. Marvel team up, Dragon Man and Lockjaw.
There you go.
I'm so there. But Crystal can stay home. You know what? I'd probably like the Inhumans a lot better if I just didn't encounter Crystal every time I encountered them. She's on my list. She's probably farther down my list than some people. She's probably in closer to 8 or 10, but she's on my list. If you've listened to any of our previous issues, you probably know about the list, but she's on there. She's just a little deeper than some other people. Anyways, back on target. Sorry. It is a really good storyline. I don't hate the Inhumans. They're just not, not big on my all-time list. But this storyline starting at 44 is really their birthplace. This is the first time that Medusa becomes something other than just a villain with superpowers, as she's shown to be a member of this race. And you meet Gorgon and all the rest of the Inhumans, including Crystal,
who Johnny gets smitten with.
Oh, well, let's face it. Johnny falls in love pathetically easily.
Well, I mean, he's just getting out of high school at this point. He's about to go to college.
And he is really, really, even for the Human Torch, he's pretty immature. And that's saying something. But it's like the two of them, they see each other not even across a room. They're like across a sky. She's on the ground and he's flying and he's on fire. And they see each other and suddenly it's like, oh, I can't live without you. I love you. I can't stop thinking about you. It's like, I want to say the pathetic, but it's not, it's hormonal. I don't know. Pheromones. Do Inhumans have pheromones that are... Maybe that's her superpower. I never really quite understood what her effing superpower was supposed to be.
She was an elemental.
So maybe that's it. It's pheromones. She's an elemental. He's fire. That explains it. I needed an explanation here because that whole instant gonna die, I've hardly known you 5 minutes is...
Well, I almost kind of wonder if it was like Stanley's somewhat attempted, almost a comic book superhero Romeo and Juliet scenario.
There are definitely some overtones in that whole...
we want to be together, but we can't.
Our families are keeping us apart.
We come from two different worlds.
There's definite shades of Romeo and Juliet without the daggers and the poison. Definite shades there. It's just, there's that part of me, it's like it happened so fast. But you know what? I remember high school and
it would happen about that fast.
It would happen about that fast sometimes. So, I'm just old and bitter now looking back that it seems so ridiculous.
He handed me the brownie on his tray from lunch. He must love me.
Oh, pass him this note, please. Anyways. So you've got all that going on, and actually Reed and Sue are newlyweds at this point.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't even been married that long. You get some classic Thing stuff, and the Thing also is still, and this is always going to be part of the Thing's makeup, is him having to deal with the fact that he feels like he's a monster because he's the Thing, and he feels unlovable and whatnot. And that's even when I encountered him many years later, that was still part of his dynamic and his makeup. That's just part of his psyche.
The Ben Grimm pity party.
The Ben Grimm pity party. And here it's a little more raw, but like I said, this is early days for this book. And this is early days and some of the most impactful storylines. I mean, the Galactus storyline alone has resonated through, I have to say, every comic to some degree in the Marvel Universe.
Many scenarios, many stories are springboarded from some of these early appearances.
Totally. This is like foundational groundwork for so much of what is built in later years in so many different storylines.
There's also what I really liked about this particular period in these comics, because like I said, it's one thing to binge read them many years later, but there was something that was really brilliant that they were doing at this time when you look at it on a monthly level, was that Stan would like give you the cliffhanger kind of scenario, and then he would wrap it up within the next issue, almost halfway through the next issue. It's like, here we're coming to the cliffhanger, and now we're going to wrap up that little story that we were doing in the first half of this issue, and we're going to build up to the next issue. Yeah. And then in the next issue, we're going to wrap it up in the first half, and then we build up to that second half. It's actually a classic movie serial type of pacing that they used to do with the serial movies back in the 30s, with like the adventures of the Green Hornet and the Shadow and those kind of people.
It's how you keep them hooked.
Oh, yeah, but it's just classically done this way, is what you would love. There's so much story in an individual issue.
There is so much story, and it moves fast. It does not drag. You get a ton of story, some really awesome art, and it's just all whammed into there. I mean, look at this. We're discussing the Inhumans and the Galactus saga right now. We're talking issues 44 through 48 for the Inhumans, and then issues 49 and 50 for the Silver Surfer and Galactus saga. That is not even 8 issues we're dealing with here. And there's so much happening!
I mean, you go from them first being introduced to the Inhumans to eventually you go to the Great Refuge. I mean, you're introduced to the Great Refuge where the Inhumans live, and you're introduced to Black Bolt's, dweeb of a brother.
Yeah, his brother's pretty dweeby.
Who's pretty much handling the crown at this moment. Now, in comic books, if you have a brother and you have a kingdom, chances are, even a half-brother, chances are he's a real creep. I mean, that's happened for Aquaman. It's happened for Thor. I mean, has there been a time where, like, the brother's been really cool? Nope, I got it for you. I got it. No, don't worry about me. Everything's going to run smooth. I'm not going to try to take over.
You know what? It's not just comics. Look at history. Look at Richard III. I mean, it's not just history. Uneasy lies the head that wears the crown, especially if you got a brother sitting next to you or standing behind you. I mean, historically,
It ain't just a trope.
It ain't just a trope. It's not a trope. Royal brothers can be bad news.
Oh, yeah, but like I said, we go from, this whole Inhuman saga, they barely just like get back from like the Great, Refuge to pretty much come across the Watcher.
Yeah, and I gotta say, thank heavens for this, but our Watcher's really bad at his job. When you think about it, what's your job? I'm to watch, but never interfere. What do? I interfere all the time. His job performances must constantly say needs improvement. Non-interference needs improvement. There must be a real shortage. That's the only reason to explain why he hasn't been replaced or sacked or canned, because when it comes to that old non-interference clause, our Watcher sucks. Because really, if it wasn't for our Watcher being so unable to keep his mitts off of interfering, we'd have been we'd have been Galactus.
Of course, he's the first one to tell you. Now, I'm not really supposed to say anything.
Oh yeah, he always prefaces. I am forbidden to interfere, but I'm going to send you over here to get this ultimate weapon. I'm going to guide you through subspace and beyond galaxies and time so that you can keep Galactus from eating you. And this is the only planet I'm ever going to stop him from eating in the whole of space and time.
I'm not going to call Galactus a villain, as much as I'll refer to him more as like a force of nature, a force in the universe, and inevitable. But in this particular story, I will refer to him as a foe. When you have a foe that's introduced into a comic of this magnitude, I can't think of, and once again, I could be wrong, there could be comic historians, telling me otherwise, but I don't think prior to this, there's ever been an antagonist that has come into a comic book of superheroes from somewhere in the universe that could just devour your entire world and doesn't really care if you've got a problem with it. He doesn't even regard you as much as like, oh, are you trying to attack me? He really regards you as much as ants invading your picnic.
Well, that's just it. He's not really evil any more than when you accidentally step on a bunch of ants that's all laid out very well in the book and in the storyline and the writing. Galactus is not evil incarnate. He is just a force. He's like a hurricane or whatever. He's just a force of nature. It's just he's on a different scale.
But I'm just saying, is to my knowledge, this is like the first that you've had that kind of being. Any superhero coming across, or a superhero team coming across anybody of that kind of magnitude, that kind of threat.
Yeah, I think the closest character of this sort of galactic magnitude, shall we say, previously encountered would probably have to be like the Watcher. And once again, he's supposed to have been hands-off, so he's not really been a foe or an opponent so much as a standby, occasional meddler. Nothing malevolent. And Galactus isn't inherently malevolent. It's just his very,
the ramifications.
The ramifications of him running across you can be less than desirable, shall we say.
But you get that whole saga where his herald, Silver Surfer comes in.
Well, that's the other thing. This is the first exposure, the first appearance of the Silver Surfer, and his backstory has not even been fleshed out yet.
It won't even be told for a good number of years.
It will not even be told for a good number of years, and in some regards, I think that's kind of cool. Well, also, you don't really know how many millennia and stuff had passed. And all of it spent with just him and Galactus out in deep space, no real interactions with anyone else, which is why his simple interactions with Alicia have such a profound impact on him in this storyline. It's like
Alicia being Ben's blind girlfriend.
Yes, the artist Alicia, who's Ben Grimm's blind girlfriend. Ben Grimm is the Thing, for those who don't know. He has what's a relatively simple interaction with her, but it's like it causes an emotional awakening within him. He starts to realize that, just because these beings aren't on the same scale as Galactus doesn't invalidate their right to existence.
Right.
And decides that we're worthy of him trying to defend us and turn against his master to try and help us out. Doesn't really have much success, which is why we're lucky for us that the Watcher is really a meddler. Because if he hadn't meddled and hadn't sent Johnny off to get the ultimate nullifier, we'd have been gobbled. We'd have been a burp.
Well, like I said, the scale of the Marvel Universe just explodes in just in this issue. Because, they send Johnny way out.
Oh yeah,
way out,
and you even get a brief little touch of scrolls in here.
Yes,
just a little. You get a little scroll thrown in there too, and so you get a lot compacted and going on in here, and like I said, the Galactus and Silver Surfer storylines, they reverberate through the Marvel Universe for decades. They're still reverberating. And likewise, some of the groundwork that's laid here in the Inhumans. This is really the roots on which the Marvel Universe grows, planting here.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, it really goes exponentially if you start thinking of Marvel being, it takes place in New York City. Spider-Man's here, Daredevil's here, the Fantastic Four have the Baxter Building. And, okay, now the universe has just expanded. We've gone into the cosmic. We've gone into, the celestial beings. I mean, okay, you had the Skrulls, visiting and so forth, and we get into the Kree and all that. But this is really just expanded here to where you're going into different universes, which takes me into the next story, which is a one-off.
Right, which is really nice because you have these two epic storylines, and then they're followed up by a nice one of that's a very down to earth, singular, compact storyline that's just boom, it's right there. It's a nice pacing, shall we say?
And I'm referring to issue number 51, which is This Man, This Monster, which I'm sure there's quite a few comic book fans out there that, well, some will probably go, huh, which one? But there's many, many people who regard this as possibly one of the greatest Fantastic Four stories ever, or at least a fan favorite on many levels. It's one of my personal favorites. I really love the epic stuff, but on a one-off, this one is just, I found it very clever and really showed me that Stan still has some really cool chops of just telling it just a good story, just a good yarn.
Yeah, and the setup for this particular issue is, there's some sprinkles for the setup in the earlier storylines, little poop, which so it is a one of, but it's just not a bolt out of the blue, shall we say? It makes sense in the progression of what's going on here. But it's a really awesome story. It's a very interesting aspect on the story because the primary focus of the story is it's really all about the Thing.
I don't even think it's really about the Thing so much.
Well, that's just it. It's
about this character.
It's meant to be about the Thing, or to appear to be about the Thing, but it's not the Thing.
No, it's about this character who is nameless. Our antagonist in this one is nameless, and he seems to be an envious scientist of great knowledge, but he wants the fame, he wants the notoriety, he wants the money and the equipment and the reputation of like Reed Richards.
As so many brilliant scientists do, for whatever reason he gets so jealous and fixated of Reed Richards he wants to destroy him.
Yes, but this character throughout the entire story has no name. And I think just even that aspect of it is just brilliant. And Stan and Jack's illustrations, really just tell this story beautifully in regards that you get the meat and potatoes very early on of what the guy's motivation is. And he comes up with a way to dupe the Thing, swap positions. This is when I'm telling the plot and like I said, 50 years later, folks, there's no such thing as a spoiler. To do this swap and for him to be like this close to achieving his selfish, evil agenda and then really truly seeing the other side of it.
Yeah, he sees himself and his motivations for as petty and as crass as they are, and he sees the nobility that is in Reed and the Fantastic Four, and that they're not in it necessarily for fame and glory and riches. They're in it for the betterment of man.
I mean, there's a bit where it's going to come down that he and Reed are pretty much going to, they're going to die.
Yep.
And Reed seems to be more concerned with him than himself.
And the fact that he's there with Reed, he wish, that Reed is more concerned the fact that he's going to die than Reed's going to die. That's what's upsetting him, is that his friend is dying, not that he's dying.
Right. And, the guy makes the great sacrifice and saves Reed. It's just like I said, and nobody knows who that guy is.
No. You never, and they, even they say they will probably never know who he was. He's never mentioned as anything other than the imposter is the closest he comes to a name,
Yeah.
other than Ben's name.
Right. And of course, we get that glimpse of where when this guy takes over as the Thing, Ben just becomes regular Ben Grimm for a little while.
Yes.
Which is always kind of fun to watch, Ben Grimm go around just as Ben Grimm.
Can be sometimes.
Ticked off Ben Grimm's always kind of interesting.
It's amazing how often when Ben Grimm reverts to being Ben Grimm, how somehow he winds up being ticked off. It's like a human Ben Grimm is 4 out of 5 Ben Grimms are pissed off.
But like I said, along with what I think is just a really wonderful story, also is some of the most top-notch, just pushing the envelope artwork that had ever exploded out of a Marvel comic up to that date. I mean, some of the splash pages, there's the bit where Reed goes into subspace, and you just get this kind of half-tone, photographic kind of background that, Reed's seen this whole other kind of universe, this other kind of point in the universe of subspace.
Well, even before you get that, there's a full page where they go into the locked room and they see the device that Reed has built, this radical cube that he's designed to help him explore subspace, and it's just a full page, and this is a freaking awesome drawing of a scientific huge doodaddy machine.
Yeah,
it's like MC Escher.
I mean, we say it all the time. People have been saying it for years, but there's a reason for it. Nobody could build the architectural, scientific doohickeys like Jack Kirby. You don't know what it's going to do, but it looks like it's just awesome. And the engineering probably makes zero sense, but it just looks so dang cool. And I stand by the term doohickey.
It's a pretty freaking awesome looking doohickey. It's just freaking awesome, and well deserving of a full page. I mean, it's awesome. It's really great art. Well, I mean, he's Kirby.
Like I said, I could keep going on and go, let's go into the Black Panther. Let's keep going into Wakanda. Let's go into, the Vibranium, because this period just issue after issue after issue. I mean, those come in right after this.
Right. Issue number 52, Black Panther.
Yeah, but you know what? We're going to cut it off on this issue because we're a half-hour program, kind of, sort of. But like I said, you could just kind of keep going. But just within this 1 year period, we're not even a full year.
Not even a full year. A little over a half a year. And you've got two of the most impactful storylines in Marvel Universe history. You have the first appearance of almost every major Inhuman
of the royal family.
Ever. You have the first appearance of the Silver Surfer, the first appearance of Galactus. You get some Dragon Man. Everything's better with Dragon Man.
And you're poised just to keep going.
And then as soon as you're out of there, you're gonna run right into the Black Panther. I mean,
Wakanda, Claw, all that.
Such a jam-packed period in comics. Such massively awesome and impactful storylines.
I mean, for me, this is, like I said, my all-time favorite period of the Fantastic Four. And for me, this is some of my all-time favorite period of comics ever. For me.
For you. And I get that. These are great stories. They're great storylines. I can't quite say it's the most impactful and beloved for me. I got a lot of love for him. Don't get me wrong.
Well, you reap the benefits of what happens after.
I reap the benefits of what happens after. If you've listened to the podcast, you know I like strong female characters. And unfortunately, this is a time period in comics when the strong female character is a little lacking, to be polite about it, which would be the only thing I would think could improve it. This Sue Storm is what she is. She's not the Sue Storm I know and love from later on down the line, but she's her roots. She's where she grew from. And it's important to know your Marvel history. This is what sends me on a rant anytime I ever go see certain movies and stuff. It's like, didn't you read the comics? But I think it's really important to know your Marvel history. I think it's important to know where these characters came from, what they grew out of. These are the seeds of a mighty oak. I mean, It's awesome. But check it out if you ever get the chance. It's
Like I
out
said, we
there.
stopped at issue number 51. Doesn't mean you have to.
Oh, heavens no. And there's some good stuff down the line. Now, I know this was a way back trip on the Wayback Machine, but you know what? It's well worth bringing out the Wayback Machine now and again. So in the spirit of things, until next time, true believer, I am the violently vivacious Vicky Sebring.
And I am the smiling straight shooter, Scott Sebring.
And this has been My Comic Crush. Nuff said. My Comic Crush is a production of Sebring Arts, executive producers Vicky Sebring and Scott Sebring, sound production and theme music by Scott Sebring, special guest provided by Blackmail and Shameless Baking. For more episodes in this series, you can visit our website at mycomiccrush.com or find us on iTunes, Podcast Republic, or wherever fine podcasts can be found. That's all for now, so go out and read something.